Mahogany Homes is a great way to train construction on an ultimate Ironman. With good practice and using some of the available resources, you can get anywhere between 50k an hour with lower tier methods using novice contracts to up to 95k an hour when using the Prif, Teaks, and Sawmill. This method is very nice for people like me who don't want a solo winter taunt. Even though that is technically more efficient, this is very much more akin to the normal Ironman gameplay that I'm used to, and that is why I really preferred it. This is a very low requirement method, and there is a very low cost to entry as well, with beginner contracts costing about 1.1 GP per XP, novice contracts costing about 1.3 GP per XP, and adept contracts costing less than 2 GP per XP. Additionally, there is not a huge amount of inventory space required. The main issue that you're going to run into is actually getting the steel bars, but there's a variety of methods that we can use that will allow us to be able to get the steel bars in ways that aren't necessarily overly complicated. This is an example of a lower tier setup that you might have when you don't have things like noted steel bars. You'll be using the ring of elements to come here. Imagine that's that. The memoir will still serve as your way to get to Hasidius. The necklace is very hard to get. You don't need graceful. You can replace this with anything. If you're doing the Savannah Teaks, you're going to want to replace this with the log basket just so that you don't have to make as many trips out to the Teaks, but I still would suggest just doing the oak trees here. So all you'll do is you'll cut an inventory of the oak logs, and then immediately go and buy the planks at the sawmill. Now, the reason that we have the Ardoin cloak here is one of the easier ways of getting the steel bars that we need is actually to mine coal and steel here at the monastery and use superheat. So what you might do is you might mine maybe 3 to 4 pieces of coal worth of, or pieces of steel worth of coal, and then superheat it for the bars that you need. So I'll come over here, get that, get 1 piece of iron, and it only slows you down a little bit. It's not really that awful, and it's a very easy way of getting steel bars. I personally much prefer this to using things like the blast furnace. The blast furnace, you would just make an inventory, buy 28 iron and coal at the blast furnace, withdraw what you need, and you have to use the minigame teleport. You alternatively could just teleport to the Grand Exchange and use the minecart to get down there, but I feel that this is much easier. The lost inventory slots from the pickaxe, nature rune, and our dune cloak are annoying, but I feel like overall, this is just a very much more laid back method. This is an example of what I might consider more high tier setup. We have the plank sack once we get the 350 points. This just makes it so that we don't have to go back and take trips to the sawmill nearly as much. With the Ring of the Elements, it's not really a problem, obviously, since you just teleport right there, the oak trees are there, you cut them, and it's plain and simple. You can get the offhand and camo hammer, and you can get things like the twin flame staff that function for both runes at once, which saves you an inventory slot on your runes possibly. But truly, for Mahogany Homes, you only need the 3 runes that we had in our previous setup. The Kardest Memoirs is still going to be our teleport to Hasidius. You can see it teleports us just outside where we want to be, which gives us very easy access to all 3 of the spots that we want to get to. You alternatively could get the Shazian Amulet, which teleports you down here, which is very close to Barbara, and a little further from the other 2, but that would require killing the Lizardman Shamans, and getting the Fangs can be annoying, and you could go very dry for it like I had initially, which is not a very fun time. You can get noted steel bars from many places, including sulfur lizards, which drop them at in stacks of 5 at a rate about 1 in 32. Though I wouldn't necessarily recommend this until you hit something like 75 Slayer, and can start farming things like gargoyles, which drop them in much more frequent stacks and at much higher stacks as well. Obviously, you can always get axe upgrades, but this is absolutely not needed. Your rune axe will do perfectly fine. The wieldable saw isn't really a huge upgrade because, like I said, you're going to want to use that slot for a teleport staff anyways, at least until you get the upgraded rune pouch. Whenever you start doing it with the Prif Teaks, you'll also be keeping a stack of crystal shards on you. While you might think that this is a waste of inventory space, you'll get about 15 an hour whenever you do it, and whenever you're doing Mahogany Homes, even for an slightly extended period, such as for 10 hours straight, that ends up stacking up to a pretty decent stack of crystal shards, about 5 crystal trees worth, which really does end up being worth it in the long run. Now you can see here, I have my items death banked at Hespori. You could do it at places like Zulra. If you don't feel comfortable doing this, feel free to just put all your items in the looting bag. Having one more inventory slot is not going to be a huge waste of space. Obviously, if you feel free, or if you feel safe, like I do, you can do it at Hespori. But this obviously is not going to be for everyone. The actual process of doing Mahogany homes is very simple and not much different than doing it on a normal Ironman. You'll go get your construction contract from whoever you'd like and teleport when at a low level, and when you don't have 70 construction / Song of the Elves completed, you'll teleport to the Earth Altar and chop down your oak trees. You could alternatively use the hot air balloon, but I still believe that chopping the oak trees using the Earth Altar is much better. The Ring of the Elements is a slight detour into Guardians of the Rift, but I feel like it gives a lot of early game utility, especially before you lock in that slot with things like the Berserker Ring. This gives you various teleports to places, such as by the Falador farming patch, or into Alcarid, which is very great for the Rune Cellar in Ali Morsane. Additionally, if you're like me and needed some GP before you did your grind, say from 40-ish to 70 construction for Song of the Elves, doing Guardian of the Rift will give you a lot of money when you sell things like the blood runes from the pools, which is how I funded my journey to 70 construction before I had things like Corrupted Gauntlet. But you'll come here, you'll fill up your inventory with about 16 logs total, and then go up to the Sawmill Operator. Obviously, if you have less inventory slots, you'll have things like crystal shards, you can fit more. It's really just up to you how often you want to go and make steel bars using the Ardoin Monastery. But then you'll simply just go. Remember, with our runes, we'll have Falador, Ardun, and Varrock. If you have it set to the Grand Exchange, I would just go ahead and configure it to set it to the Varrock teleport. And then, after that, it's just a simple matter of going and actually finishing the contract. Usually, you'll be able to squeak out 1, sometimes 1.5 inventories, or trips. Whenever you're super low on inventory space when you don't have the plank sack, usually it's just worth it to do the one contract, go back to the Varrock sawmill, and then go and get more planks. But for me, I've been able to squeeze out sometimes 3 and most of 4 contracts using the planks and my plank sack. Whenever you have Song of the Elves finished, what you'll want to do is teleport outside of your home into Prif and just simply run over to the sawmill. The sawmill is right next to the teak trees. You can bring a knife and a teak log if you want to tick manipulate, but I found that I was getting about 90 to 95k XP an hour without that, and still about 30k woodcutting XP an hour, which I felt like was perfectly fine for me and not worth the extra effort just to go through and get a tiny bit more XP an hour. Whenever you finish cutting your inventory of teak logs, you'll be able to just run right to the sawmill operator, who's directly next to it, and pay for your logs. At this point, you probably will have enough of the points from the last time you did Mahogany homes to get to 70 in order to buy the plank sack. And for this, I would highly recommend it, because even though this is much better XP, given that it's not necessarily directly next to the sawmill, just like the Earth Altar is with the Ring of the Elements, this is one where trying to cram out as many trips or as many contracts as you can in one inventory is going to be beneficial to you. This is what it might look like if you went and did the Teaks outside of Civitas Illifortis. You'll teleport here, and then take the Quetzal here down to Outer Fortis. We see here, there's the teak trees, there's the Quetzal. So it's just a simple run south from Outer Fortis. This is where we're going to be wanting things like the log basket, because even though this is not necessarily too far away, you could also take it to Colossal Worm. I'm not really sure which is closer, but even though it's not necessarily too far away, this is still a run that's going to be adding time onto you. You can do this whenever you just have the Ring of the Elements. If you want to get slightly higher XP rates than just using normal oak and the Earth Altar. But after you have an inventory of teak logs here, you're just going to go to the Earth Altar like normal. Once again, why I suggest the Elemental Ring over using things like balloons. You're going to come here and you're just going to buy the planks like normal. Now, I previously thought that you had to use the log basket on a bank in order to get the logs out. Well, it turns out you can just check, empty it, and it'll give it to you right in your inventory. So the log basket actually probably does have a use if you're doing things like this. But once again, if you're in Prif, you're just going to be right next to the sawmill operator anyways, getting the teak logs all in the same place. So not necessarily worth it when you do it at places like that. You might consider spending some of your carpenter points on the supply crates in the Mahogany Homes reward shop. The steel bar drop is about 1 out of 7 from any given crate, and they come in quantities of about 24. Now to sustain this, it'll take about 10 novice contracts, which should cost about 5 steel bars. If you do this using adept contracts, this should cost about 6 contracts or 7 contracts worth of points to get the crate, and that should cost 3 to 4 steel bars on average. Now, there are other ways that you might want to spend your carpenter points. You might want excess plate sacks for later when you do construction in the future. This is what I personally prefer. You might value spending them on the Amy saw. This is also a good option, giving you a nice offhand and freeing up an inventory slot. But given that that inventory slot is usually going to be filled with a teleport item, such as a staff for the rooms you need for the various teleports, or that it might be filled with things like the Incamdo Hanner, this might not be as valuable as you initially think it is, but it is storable, unlike the plank sack. So regardless, it is a valuable option and something that you should not overlook. Things like the Amy saw also are very useful whenever you go to build some of the higher material sites in the player-owned house. Things like the basic jewelry box and the ornate pools can get very tight on inventory space, even when doing them on normal iron accounts, especially when taking into account the fact that you have to save so many slots for trying to boost to get the level to build these sites anyways. The last things that I might recommend are a few of the plugins that are very useful. The easy unnote, if you're using things like steel bars, makes it so that whenever you go to unnote things on a bank, it won't let you use noted items on anything except for banks. You can see I can use it on the Friendly Forester because he has the option to deposit logs. The Mahogany Homes plugin itself is going to be the greatest. It'll show you how many contracts you've done, it'll keep track of how many points you've earned, it'll show you what your contract is and what materials you need for it. There's also a shortest path plugin, which can tell you the best way to get to your contracts, but that's a little bit overkill in my opinion. Between those two plugins, you should have everything you need. Mahogany Homes is very simple. Gear remapping can be nice. I personally have it set so that whenever I shift click my memoir, it'll teleport me straight to Hasidius. I have the same thing with my Ring of the Elements at times, but for now I have it just set so that I have to swap left click with the Earth Altar, and that'll make it so every time I just left click, it'll bring me right to the Earth Altar. And it's very easy to reset as well. With all this in mind, I hope you really see just how simple doing things like Mahogany Homes is on an Ultimate Ironman. Construction is one of the most essential skills that you can train early on. You need it for Song of the Elves, but it also gives you access to a lot of important teleportation options. You can get things like in-house fairy rings, in-house portals, obviously through things like the portal room. The jewelry box can get you to places like Berthorpe, which is a wonderful teleport next to the Warrior Guild, obviously where you're going to be getting a lot of your food and attack and strength potions. This can give you things such as an early, almost ornate pool-like with the dueling rings to the Ferrex Enclave. It's not exactly the same thing, but, you know, it doesn't take a whole lot of GP. Obviously, whenever it only costs about 1.7 GP per XP, getting these early levels, about 84, isn't going to be cheap, but it's not going to be super expensive either. I personally prefer doing this to things like things such as the limestone brick method. The limestone brick method has gotten better when doing things such as the stonemasons in Varlamore, but I have always enjoyed Mahogany Homes on my normal Ironman, so I think that if you're like me and you're just looking for an easier way that's much more familiar to you, this is probably the way to go. The gameplay loop feels more natural, you get actual rewards out of it. So thank you for watching, I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. I know this wasn't a super in-depth guide. This is more just a primer on getting people used to some of the Ultimate Ironman skilling methods that might exist. I'm really just here to prove that the gameplay isn't really as scary as you think. You don't need to go super crazy and max an Ultimate Ironman to be able to play it. This is kind of a mindset a lot of the UIM players have had, but I've always felt like the game mode is just very cozy and offers something that the other game modes just don't really possess and can't come close to. So thank you for watching. Hopefully I'll have more skilling guides like this out in the future. I had done one on the Giants Foundry using the plate bodies from the Varlamore store. Please go feel free to watch that. Once again, just another video showing you that the level of entry to some of the early / mid-game Ultimate Ironman skilling methods actually isn't really as high as people think it is. But anyways, I hope that you have a nice day, and once again, I hope you stick around for more guides in the future, or the Ultimate Ironman series that I'll be reviving very soon.